Welcome to Thinkin, a podcast series by Kautilyans School of Public Policy.
Hello everybody, I am Aditya Jingan and welcome to Thinkin podcast of Kautilyans School of Public Policy. We are coming with a series to discuss the stories of individuals who solved or trying to solve one or the other social problem. And who will be more apt to start this series with Dr. Ashwin Mahesh, an urbanist, social technologist, journalist, scientist, and most importantly, a problem solver who is trying to make this world more livable. Sir, thank you very much for joining us. It's pleasure to have you, sir. Sir, so I want to start the interview on a lighter note and also addressing the question which is like a lot of my colleagues were asking is that what was the role of movie Swadesh in your homecoming?
A lot of people ask this question.
Okay.
Partly, I think it's there are two things, right? I was at NASA, I came back home.
Yeah.
Right? But I always say, by and large, in my experience, most people who leave the country and go somewhere, if you go to Calcutta and then come back to Bangalore, nobody will say, "Aap Calcutta chhod ke Bangalore, why did you come back?"
Yeah.
If you go to Ahmedabad and come back, also they will not ask this too many things. But if you go outside the country and come back, and especially if you leave some reasonably nice job and come back, people will say, "Arey, why did you do that?" Right?
Yeah.
In my experience, people do this primarily for only one reason, and that is family.
Okay.
Right? In a sense, quality of life is good in many places in the world. Opportunities are good in many places in the world. Without being comparative about it, there's no reason why young people should not pursue opportunities in different places. But for a variety of reasons, some people want to go back home.
Yeah.
I came back home, end of story. The movie was made around the same time that I was coming back home also. So I have some insight into the sorts of things that went into the movie. But I don't think much about it.
Okay, so there was not much influence of the movie.
No, the movie was made actually around the same time.
Okay.
It was in the sense I don't, and it was made in Goddard Space Flight Center where I worked.
Okay.
But in a sense, what I would say is, nobody will do that by and large. People, a very, very small percentage of the people will say, I want to go back home, work on some development challenges and all that. And also, it's not necessary to come back home to work on development challenges. You live somewhere, there are enough development challenges. Even in Washington, there were lots of development challenges.
Yeah.
You can sort of work on those as well. So, I don't think much about it.
Okay. Okay. So, sir, we are kind of aware about what you did and what you are doing right now.
Yeah.
But I wanted to take you a little back and ask you that when you came back, what was the process of you embedding yourself into the ecosystem? Because you're coming from from other country, like you have lived for a very long time. So how did you came back to Bangalore and whether you knew some people or you started doing something? How did you embedded yourself into an ecosystem which we talk about is very important process of solving any problem?
Well, in a sense, I didn't have a job. I used to study clouds in Antarctica.
Okay.
And well, for a variety of reasons that could not be done after I came back. I said, okay, something else has to be done.
Okay.
And so, but there's no shortage of problems. If you look around, you can see lots of problems.
Yeah.
But the thing that I was looking for was to say that in addition to identifying some problem or even the reasons for those problems, before along with your interest in those problems, you also need to be able to say, what can you do?
Okay.
Right? Most people think I can't do anything. But actually, if you embed yourself in some problem and begin to look at it in some detail, something will emerge that you can do.
Okay.
And various people at that point suggested urbanization is big in India. It's becoming a big issue. And there's lots of complexities emerging from urbanization. So maybe we can look at that. And then traffic and all the obvious signs of urbanization. So I started thinking about it and said, okay, what is something that I can do about this? I finally found something which I thought I could do, which is essentially create visualizations of the city. Most people who are trying to solve city problems are doing that without having a mental map or an actual visualization of what that problem looks like, especially the spatial dimension of the problem.
Okay.
So I said, okay, let's start making maps of the city. A map for traffic, a map for poverty, a map for housing, and so on and so on. And then you begin to understand the city better. And because you understand the city better, you can respond to it.
So what is that credibility factor? For example, if I want to solve a problem, people will have a lot of doubts. So do you think that you are coming from, NASA and the background which you have, which you had helped you to gain that credibility in the ecosystem initially, or you did?
It's hard to say. Like I said, you are where you are, and you have to sort of work with that. You can't. You can take some things forward, and people will sometimes give you credit for what you have done. But ultimately, you have to add value in whatever it is you're doing at that time. You can't. That can't be substituted in some way. I think what really helped is I found something that could be done without too much of anyone else's support.
Okay.
And that's important, because then you are adding something. When you're adding something, you have a seat at the table that is uniquely yours. Right? Let's say we are all working on a problem together, that you suddenly bring a new perspective or a new capability that you alone have. And therefore, that, in some sense, that seat is held for you. And it can emerge. If you spend enough time in any ecosystem, something will emerge that you feel you can add value.
Okay. So, sir, like going little more back, when did you develop this knack of problem solving? Is it like you develop along the way, or is it like you have always been like this? Like how you, because you are kind of dedicated your life to solve problems. So how you?
The phrase problem solving society.
Yeah.
That's more recent, I would say. I'm only actually doing that in the last 3 to 5 years in a deliberate way. But before that, I had one thumb rule, which a lot of people have pointed to over the years, which is to say, rather than solve problems, actually try to increase the number of problem-solving people.
Yeah.
So, in a sense, while I'm teaching problem-solving, this course on problem-solving society, it's not actually an instruction course on how to solve any one problem or any type of problem. It's a general course on how to become a problem-solving person first. Okay. If you become a problem-solving person, it is inevitable, possibly natural, that you'll go on to become a problem solver as well. So becoming a problem solver is a second step in my mind.
Okay.
Being a problem-solving person is the first step.
Was there any person who inspired you to like kind of come into this domain of problem solving? Was there any person whom you looked up to, who has been your inspiration?
No, let's see. In anyone's life, you learn from the experiences of others. You spot opportunities based on your capacities and talents and move forward. Certainly, you grow up in a certain kind of home, you get certain kinds of inputs from that. You see people achieving things around you or doing things around you. Some of it is personal and professional. Some of it is also for public purpose. So in a sense, I certainly feel like I benefited from all of that. My mom started a school many years ago. So I felt like, okay, it was an interesting kind of thing to do. That is, I want to teach in a different way. So that makes you think, okay, maybe teaching is also an interesting thing to do.
Okay.
I haven't actually formally taught very much, but I think of teaching as something that is possible outside the institutional framework also. And that also adds something. The practice environment can be added outside the institutional framework as well.
Okay.
So yeah, definitely, I learned some things at home. I had a very interesting professor at in grad school who was phenomenal with time management. And he would do these adjacencies thing. He would study something, and then something else will be adjacent to it. He'll start studying that. Then something else will be adjacent to that. He'll start studying that. So over a period of time, he just acquired expertise and insight into lots of things just by going to adjacencies. That's something that you can do a lot in problem solving.
So it kind of attracts you to be a polymath, right? Able to do a lot of things.
I've always liked polymaths. Even when I was a kid, I used to like Da Vinci, Russell, people like that. It seems it's kind of fascinating that you can do 5 different things well. I mean, most people can do something well, but to be able to do 4 or 5 things well, that was fascinating. So, okay, how did these people become that kind of person? And is there a method in some of what they did that you can follow? I mean, a lot of them worked incredibly hard. There's no thing away. And a lot of them they were diligent in their and persistent in what they did. And they were productive over a long period of time. So in some sense, being whatever you are comes out of all of those kinds of things. But I've always been interested in saying, and one thing alone is not enough to give you the satisfaction of achievement from what you do. In schools also, sometimes I say a lot of people will ask young children, what do you want to be when you grow up? I think we should ask them, what all do you want to be when you grow up?
Okay.
And you'll get a much broader spectrum of answers. And you should encourage people to be more than one thing when they grow up.
And it's the age to like explore a lot of things.
Yeah.
So as a policy student, I would be interested to know, what do you think are the essential skills, or what kind of attitude one should have to become a problem solver, or to solve any problem around them or in a larger scale?
See, a lot of students, when they enroll in a policy course, have in some way, if you ask them this question, why are you in a public policy school?
Yeah, that's an important,
Right. Many of them will say, because after this I want to go and solve some problems. That's the main reason to come here. That is so I feel if that part is good, because you already have that. Therefore, the one thing that I thought I could do is teach problem solving itself. You are learning economics and sociology and political science and 15 other things, fiscal policy and all sorts of things, politics, as capacities for problem solving. But I think it's useful to learn problem solving itself in addition to each of these topics. So I suggested to Kautilya, why don't we just create a course on problem solving itself, which is not about any of these disciplines, but it's a methodological intervention.
Yeah. So to this question even is kind of a dilemma with a lot of my colleagues are facing, and even me. Yes, we know that we kind of want to solve problems, but to identify that one problem which you want to solve at this stage becomes very difficult. For example, in your course, it was kind of a lot of reflection and introspection for me, and then I realized, okay, this is why I was here. But that one problem which you want to start with, you don't know. So how do you reach that journey, or you just pick, or you become part of someone who's trying to solve some problem? Like, what is the way to figure that?
I mean, you can reduce it to a way of discovering that. You can say, at the beginning of the course, if at the beginning of the course I had told you, okay, find 10 people who are doing good things according to you. Go and offer them your help. Right? You would have found 10 people, and you would have offered to help them. They would have told you something. That would have been a really good start. Because the practice, everybody thinks, not everybody, but a lot of people think, I want to do something. I need to find other people to do this with me. This is a very common sentiment. I mean, agar mere saath aur 4 log hote to, I can do something or the other, right? But I'm saying, why don't you invert that? And so go find 10 people who are doing things that you like. First, offer them your help. In the very act of helping them, you would have started building the ecosystem around yourself.
Okay.
And then you'll also have 10 things to look at that you could possibly build into things you want to do.
Okay, interesting. Okay. So now we will move to about the course. It's very fascinating and interesting for me. So one of the important part of this podcast is to make people aware about what we are doing here in Kautilyans School of Public Policy about the course. So I'm going to ask you questions related to that now. So can you take me through that journey of conceptualization and ideation of the course of Introduction to Public Problem Solving? Like how you thought?
Yeah, so first, as I told you, I thought we should teach problem solving itself, right? Which is, instead of just capacity, we should teach problem solving methods as well. And then about 1.5 years ago, I proposed to the director that this could be tried in Kautilyans.
So why Kautilya? Just wanted to.
Well, I know Sridhar.
Okay.
At some level, and also many of these institutions are new. I know other people also. I know the Takshashila people. In a sense, I was saying, can we try something? And to be honest with you, this distinction in how we are doing the course, I can't claim that it was there in the beginning in my mind. The only thing that was in my mind was it has to be directly focused on learning problem solving. Right?
Okay.
But what does that mean?
Yeah.
Then what happened? I said, okay, look, what can I offer in that course? The main thing I can offer is my own lived experience of doing certain things. If you do these things, you will be able to impact certain things positively. So there's a lived experience, number one. But I think at some level, as I talk to more and more people about it, and especially eventually when I spoke to Socrates and Arvind and Rajesh about it in particular, the Socrates people said that there are conceptual frameworks for learning in particular, or intervening in problems, which can also be taught alongside the lived experience.
Okay.
So we went through those conceptual frameworks as a second part of the course. The third element is learning from each other. In a lot of what you are learning now in the courses, you are learning from others who have the same method around a different problem in some way.
Yes.
Right? So you are learning the nuances of that approach. You're also learning critical evaluation of other people's work in the process. And you're also seeing the adjacencies. If you're going to try this in a certain geography, in fact, you can try this and that in that same geography.
Yeah.
So I would not think of what we are doing, I don't think of what we are doing as groundbreaking. Right? In fact, it should be the norm.
Yeah, okay.
It should be the norm. And normally this is how problems actually get addressed. But unfortunately, not many people have, what's the word, coursified it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not been made into a course.
Yeah.
But there's no reason why it can't be easily made into a course and taught in every college, as it were. So, and then once Arvind said, okay, he will teach all these conceptual frameworks kind of thing. So I also feel a little bit more confident. Now, kuch to hai isme. Initially, I thought maybe it's like an 8 or 10 class course for a single credit.
Okay.
Now we feel, okay, now we are actually offering it as a full 3 credit elective, right?
Yeah.
And then also it was an elective. There was a question of whether it should be a compulsory course or a elective course. I wasn't really sure, to tell you the truth. But I feel if it's a popular elective, then it is somewhat like a compulsory course only at some level. I still think even next year people will be interested in taking this course again. And I think some of the feedback from you guys to your own colleagues now also has been that there is some merit in this thing, because I see lots of other students also come talk to me about what they want to do as well. So in my assessment, this has potential.
Yes, sir.
But it has to be detailed out to say, okay, look, here is what you learn in a 3-month program, in a 3-month in-class semester program. Now you have a capstone project for 3 months. So how does this continue into a capstone? And if some people want to do a year-long exploration of this kind of thing, how can that be continued? So we're putting those pieces together. So learning itself has to be a continuous thing. There is something that you do in the class, but it doesn't stop with the class.
Okay.
And how do you create those continuing opportunities as well?
No, sir, I think there will be a lot of people next year also to take this course. We not only from we are giving feedback, and it has been a very interesting course. So if you have to boil down to one objective of this course when you were planning, or even now, the single objective you had in your mind when you were preparing this course, or even now, what was you think? Okay, any student who's taking this course, this should the one thing which he go out with. The one thing, if they have to remember, it should be this.
They should feel that they are themselves a problem-solving person, and that they have a method for getting into the guts of a problem, which they instinctively trust to figure out what they can contribute. That is, you should feel, I have one tarika, like a method, right? With this, if I go down this road, something will emerge which will allow me to decide what value I can add to the efforts of others who are already doing something. Right? If at the end of this course you have that confidence about any problem, then mission accomplished.
Are you finding that in our cohort? Do the course of time, in us, are you seeing that happening?
I think people are starting to ask themselves, why didn't I think of this before?
Okay.
Right? I think that much is happening. That a lot of people have thought about what jobs they want to get. And in some cases, they're thinking, maybe I can create the job that I want to get by being useful and adding value in a certain domain. It's sort of, otherwise what happens is, okay, some company comes on campus. Whatever company comes on campus, that's the domain in which you apply for a job. If a health company comes on campus, you're applying for health policy jobs. But I think it's better to ask yourself, do you want a health policy job?
Yeah.
And if you want a health policy job, what are all the things that you should do before that company comes on campus? Right? So I think some of that is happening, but even if it's too late to intervene in the placement space this year, I would still think that it's now possible for some of you to think, based on what I've done in this course, and if I expand on that in the capstone, and if I do a 1-year fellowship in that, perhaps I actually don't need a job. I can go do this thing itself as my intervention.
Sir, actually, this is a very interesting question which we should all ask, especially as a policy student. How do you think that this course, in general, like we are going through a process, but how do you think this course will also make the student of Kautilyans School of Public Policy industry ready, or make them to go out and do well in their job in terms of skills, or in terms of the attitude which we developed during the course? How do you think that that is also one of the objective, along with other objective we are kind of fulfilling?
No, I think that if you are problem ready, not industry ready.
Okay.
If you are problem ready, then you will be industry ready.
Okay.
The problem is that if you say I want to be industry ready, then you won't be problem ready. Industry is one space from which to approach problem solving. But it's not the only space. So it's better that you are problem ready. And that's why we said very early on in the course, we said you have to look at state, market, society. And you have to come up with a way of intervening across all three. Right? And repeatedly in all your presentations, now you are forced to call out, my state maker, what will I do? What will I do in market? What will I do in society?
Yeah.
Right? This morning when I was speaking with the dean, he said, I'm really glad that you are saying that people came back with and are telling how they embedded themselves in the ecosystem of a problem, which is true. You've seen about half the presentations. You've observed that too. And you've had your own experience of it. And I said, why, really, it's natural. We made it part of the course requirement.
Yeah.
Right? There's no other way to go through this course except by embedding yourself in some problem. Right? And I think that's really all it is. That now that you have studied some problem to a reasonable degree of depth, if you wanted to, I'm sure for your capstone, you could do 3 months of it.
Yeah.
It's not that difficult. You know, you have enough starting points to do that.
Yeah.
And if you did that capstone also in an ecosystem that was supportive, then you might think, actually, maybe I can start my own institutional space around this, or my own initiative around this. I feel people who are self-confident about being able to drive problem solving themselves will fit in naturally in many different opportunities.
I think that is a very interesting point. Like being problem ready opens a lot of other spaces for you.
Yeah.
Being industry ready can open only one space. So, so what do you think are the coming opportunities for the public policy professionals? Like we are almost now going out. The next batches are coming. There are the other batches are also coming. There are people who are kind of the policy space is getting attraction. What do you think are the opportunities available in both society, business, and market for the students or the professionals who are interested in this space?
Yeah, I think fairly early on, the nature of problems also has to be taught. Problems can be technical and managerially addressed, or they are social and political and need to be addressed as social and political problems. Too often, graduates are trying to find technical and managerial responses to social and political problems.
Okay, technocrat kind of.
Yeah, no, I won't call it technocratic. I'm saying technical and managerial. That is, poverty is not an efficiency problem. It's not just about inefficient allocation of resources. There's an underlying political economy in it. Lack of education, there's an underlying political economy in it. So, or lack of water supply in your house, there's an underlying political economy. So, I think the nature of problems also has to be studied. And you must respond to the true nature of a problem.
Okay.
You can't say the problem is political, but my response is technical. It probably won't work in that case. And which means that when you get out of this college and start working on a particular problem, it's kind of ironic because a lot of the people that you'll try to influence will be politicians. Right? Politicians respond really well to political pressure.
Yeah.
but you don't plan to provide any political pressure. You plan to provide only technical pressure. So I think getting students comfortable with society, comfortable with politics, and comfortable with business all together is important. Then that is how you become problem ready.
Okay, yeah.
What is the difference between problem ready and industry ready? Industry ready is the technical and managerial part. Problem ready is the social and political part.
It's more holistic than being an industry ready.
It's more complete. I don't know if it's more holistic. It's more complete.
Yeah. Okay, so sir, this question is like on a request from a lot of my colleagues also, like, how are you finding our cohort? If you want, you can mention the name of any of your favorite student also. If you want.
No, that wouldn't be fair. Not now. If I did that, I should do it after the course.
Yeah.
What I would say is, I think this is a good cohort, and Sridhar had sort of assured me even before that look, you're all coming from a space of interest. To choose a public policy school itself is sort of you need a certain amount of interest in today, because it's still early in the development of such courses. Yeah. And you don't exactly know. You think it's kind of like an MBA, but it's not quite an MBA. It should lead to some technical managerial job, but it's not really clear what kind of job it is. Maybe it's a policy job, but there are, many policy jobs are also nothing more than lobbying. Yeah. So there are all these concerns about what. But I think you all come here out of interest, and certainly that interest is apparent, and that's good, right? Now, each of you is in a different stage of learning problem solving. And each of you is coming from different subjects that you have studied as undergraduate students. Yeah. And some of you have worked for a few years in some sector or the other. So that diversity is there. And one has to work with that. It's teaching to that diversity is also part of the requirement. But I feel that apart, there is a uniform interest, high degree of interest in problem solving. And therefore, it's working well for people of all backgrounds, whatever your starting points of. I feel it's working well for that reason, because the method is not specific to
any particular background,
any particular starting point, as it were. And therefore, I think we've gone through half the presentations, as I said. And I'm quite impressed by all of them. I expect the other half to be equally good. Yeah.
Okay, so what is your biggest takeaway from this course till now? Like even
so, there are 2-3 things, right? Okay. One is more institutions are interested in teaching the course or teaching in this way. And so we've had some people reach out to say, why don't you teach this at, I don't want to name the institutions, but let's say in Bhubaneswar, teach it in Bombay, teach it in Ahmedabad, teach it in Bangalore itself, kind of thing. So we're thinking about that, what to do. We eventually want to get this to a point where 300 students a year are learning public problem solving. Okay. And 50 people a year are in fellowships for public problem solving. Okay. That's the goal.
That's the goal.
That's the sort of the target. I don't want to call it a goal. That's the target for where we want to take this initiative in particular. Okay. And you keep on detailing that, right? Some things we discover only as we do it the first time. The second time it will be that much different. Right? If you see, and then there's also the reality also keeps changing. So when I came to speak to you about the work that we are doing in CSR, right? He was making a point at that time, which is, I started only 3.5 months ago or 4 months ago. Look what all I've been able to do in 3.5 months by embedding myself in the ecosystem. Next year he cannot say that. Next year he cannot say I started 3.5 months ago, because that would not be true. So one has to think about how you want to craft together the multiple messages from the multiple speakers. Right? You see someone like Ruben talk about how he's been doing stuff since he was a kid, right? Yeah. And his way of becoming embedded is he grew up that way. That may not be true for a lot of people trying to get into things now, but I think just for students to be able to see that there are multiple starting points from which you can get to a position of being embedded in problem solving, I think that we should keep constant.
Yeah, I think it will be very interesting. Like the more people get exposed to this course, it's a very interesting course.
The other thing is that in the fellowship we should address some large problems. And that should interest more people also. We should say there is an unspoken crisis of substance abuse in the country. That nobody talks about the drugs problem. There is a clear and very large deficit of public education. Right? You should basically say work on and there is most money in the CSR world is misapplied. Right? So you can pick certain realities out there and say we should try to change this. And that's the goal, right? You set the goal high enough that until you start to do that, you are not succeeding.
Okay.
And in the process, you can round up a lot of people's interests.
So you are like, it's need to be scaled also. Like you need to go for bigger problems too at some stage.
And also, I think if you by doing it that way, you're calling out the problem itself.
Yeah.
That is also important, right? For example, let's say now what does the IPCC say? Oh, the earth is warming really fast. We're going to get into trouble. Now, that itself doesn't lend itself to solutions, but there is a role for calling out the problem at such a high level. And we should do the same thing at the country level, in the state level.
Okay. So
Right?
that's, yeah.
So I'll give you another example.
Yeah.
60% of the people who come out of poverty become poor again.
Yeah. Okay.
We should figure out why and try to stop that. So when you state it like that, you can then break it down to say what are the 25 things that we should look at to understand why this is happening. Who are the 15 people who have studied this? What is their input already and insight already? What could be done to act on that input and insight? So you begin to be able to intervene better by stating the problem at a high level, allowing yourself opportunity for deconstruction. But the only thing different in what I would do is I would always say who has done what, right? Before I get started with anything else.
Okay, it helps you to understand the ecosystem better.
Yeah.
Once you
How
know.
will I understand? These people have been studying it. First, I got to learn.
Yeah.
Right. Essentially, I think a learning mindset has to develop first. Certain things, it's just the nature of things like Make in India. I always say Make in India has to be preceded by Sell in India.
Yeah.
Otherwise, nobody will make.
Yeah.
Right. That is true. I mean, one can talk about that. Similarly, I think a problem-solving mindset has to be preceded by a learning mindset.
Okay. Learning and evolving mindset, like you learn and then.
If you learn, it will evolve. Very few people learn and don't evolve.
Okay. Yes. Okay, sir. So we'll now move to the last section, which is kind of rapid fire. In this, I'm going to give you one word, and you have to say spontaneously. It's like your first system working here. What is coming in your mind? Like one, it can be adjective or even a sentence also. So I'm going to tell you, and then you have to be like spontaneous. We will not take much time to think on that. Okay. So sir, are we ready? We will start with that. Okay. Society.
I think we have an accumulated deficit of opportunity in society for historical reasons. That we have tried only in a technical way to correct those things and maybe in a political way. We have not adopted the necessary responsible positions to correct that and provide a more equal starting point for all people. And that is a big continuing problem in the country.
So government?
Government has started with a lot of inspirational thinking about what a self-governing society can do, but we have allowed that to deteriorate into technical and minute assessments of whether each step is valuable or not, or necessary or not. And in that process, we are missing the big picture completely. Government is suffering from a lack of capacity, and to cover up the lack of capacity, various other things have happened, which has now become lack of intent.
Okay. So business?
Business is sort of, business is kind of bizarre in India in the sense business isn't really a big part of India. Contrary to a lot of what you might hear in the popular media, there are some large businesses. There's not enough scale in Indian businesses to be globally relevant. A lot of Indian businesses are therefore domestic. But our policy environment and governance sort of guidance from Sarkar is not sufficiently oriented towards a strong domestic economy either. I think we're struggling to understand what this word business means in India. And I think that could take 20, 30 years to actually sort out. We're adopting a very, I don't like to say I don't mean to be critical when I say we're adopting a Western framework. I'm saying we're adopting a literal framework of what is a business. An incorporated entity pursuing profit for its shareholders. When you look at it like that, you come up with some idea of what a business is. But I'm saying if you think of business as commerce rather than business as business, then you'll say we're not really set up for commerce. We're set up for some businesses, but we're not set up for commerce.
So politics, Indian politics?
Indian politics has become, unfortunately, tarnished by who we have allowed to come into public life.
Okay. Like the kind of people who are coming?
Yeah, so there's no other way to say it. Half of them should have been locked up long ago.
So Kautilyans School of Public Policy, what comes to it?
I think Kautilya is a good experiment.
Okay.
And potentially, it's still, it still has potential now because of having already started and gone 2 years now, to be a kind of front runner. And therefore, there's the opportunity to set directions in methods of learning.
Okay.
Right? I don't think it's easy to distinguish yourself in what you teach. Because in some sense, the problems are widely known. Many other schools can teach those kinds of things. But I think there's a great opportunity to distinguish yourself in how you teach.
How you teach, okay.
Right? And I think being first or being among the first is helpful. It's kind of ironic that I would say Kautilya has done one thing, which, having been in problem solving for a long time, if I'm saying it, then there is perhaps some credibility also to that, even though I say it myself, in the sense that until Kautilya, if you ask me even today to say, can you think of one other public policy college or school in another university, there's no quick and easy answer to that. I know some colleges have centers or master's programs in public policy. Some of the IIMs do, some of the other colleges have. But I think a school of public policy doesn't really exist in many universities.
Yeah.
At least not that I can recall off the top of my mind. And therefore, that itself is an advantage. That in a sense, it was only after Kautilya that I began to pay attention to what quote-unquote departments and schools of policy were doing. And now I have some friends and other well-wishers and acquaintances who are teaching in various public policy programs. But I still think almost everywhere else in the country it's a program.
Yeah, it's a degree and also a very different pedagogy of teaching, like at least something.
Yeah, I don't know too many places where it's a school.
Yeah.
There are ones that are not in universities, which are also interesting. Right? Your ISPP and Takshashila and things like that, which are not in universities. They are interesting. And then you also have these ones like the law school and a few other places for setting up their own programs. It'll be interesting to see what comes out of those things. But I feel it's the potential of a standalone, when I say standalone, I don't mean outside of Geetam University, but as an entity, a public policy school, it has potential. We'll have to see. No, but like I said, that's also the reason why I feel it's good to teach in a place like this. Right? I can always say in the comfort of my own hometown, I can teach a few things with a public. There are public policy programs in Bangalore also that one could teach with. I've taught at IIM also in public policy. Occasionally taught at Takshashila. But I felt for the first time it's worth developing a dedicated course. Earlier in IIM, I used to teach a course called Reimagining Government.
Okay.
Right, which is also interesting in its own way. Perhaps some year I'll teach that also here. But for the moment, I feel this problem-solving society is a nice way to.
So it's other way also, like it's the people like you are coming, so that also gives a lot of shows the potential of Kautilyans School of Public Policy.
It's a nice thing for you to say. I genuinely hope we're adding value.
Yes.
But I think the lesson for me has been that this has potential to be done this way in more places. But it also means it has to be done by more people, not just myself or Arvind or a few other people. So we've also been thinking about how do you create the capacity for 10 people to teach this course. right? I don't want to set up a training academy, but at the same time, I want to
kind of accelerate it.
I want to accelerate it, right? Like I said, if I want 300 students a year to be learning problem solving, can I really teach all those 300 students myself, or so I guess this is the big question. How important is it who teaches, and how can you reduce that importance so that it doesn't matter who teaches, but what is taught and how it is taught.
Okay. So what comes to your mind when we talk about Bangalore, like one word?
Well, I live there. It's my hometown. So I have a responsibility to make it as good as it can be.
Okay, so if you have to choose the one problem which you want to like solve the rest of your life, or you want to dedicate for the rest of your life, what it will be? Like, the problem you think is like it can take a lot of time and it is like must solved.
I think in India, a lot of us should dedicate ourselves to constitutionalism.
Oh, okay.
Many things that are imagined in the constitution are not yet real in the lives of people. Because we are not followed through properly on the imagination or in the structures that have laid out in the constitution. We have weak local governments. We have states that interfere in things that are local governance matters. We have the center interfering in things that are state and local governance matters. We don't have good state-to-state relations. Federalism is certainly under threat now. Corruption is high. And institutions to fight that are deliberately weakened in the political space. The judges are all over the place. There isn't a clearly emerging direction of justice administration that one can spot. Sometimes it seems like we're making progress, and sometimes it seems like where did that come from? So I think. And then the states are in very different social and economic realities. Right? There is really at some level territorial integrity of the country to one side. You also want social and economic integrity or similarity at least. You can't have a situation in which some states are 1/6 of the development standards of other states, and that's not a sustainable thing as well. And our attempts at equalization have not worked. Because we have simply focused on transfers of money kind of thing. Those are not going to work. So I think there are lots of challenges, but it's also, that means lots of things to work on as well.
So I'm pretty sure like this will be very inspirational for a lot of people and young students who are going to listen to this. Sir, among all the work you do, like which is the work which you enjoy most? Like urbanist, social technologist, scientist, journalist, which is the work which you like find more?
What I enjoy is the multiplicity.
Okay. The joy of doing different things.
Yeah, I like that. And then you can say that makes me less able to do any one thing properly. But I think a lot of people are looking for that in life. If you think about it as you get older, maybe, or even young people, I think it should interest people to want to do multiple things, it seems like.
Yeah.
And I feel like I have been fortunate to be able to do many things, and not just now. I mean, this is just the part that you're seeing now, right? Earlier I was an astronomer, then I was a climate scientist, and all of those kind of things. So I felt like this diversity of experiences that I have gone through has itself been part of the fun.
Yeah.
Right? And even about problem solving, I always say, look, a lot of the problems that we work on are incredibly hard. That's why you should have fun.
Yeah. It's important to have fun.
Yeah, it's important to have fun. Without a certain amount of levity in how you conduct yourself, you can't actually. And the good news is that some of the problems are populated by characters who are clearly jokers. So it's not that difficult to have fun either.
Okay, sir, but what is the basis of this? Like, what is this desire to, what do you think it came in you to do multiple things? Like, I know a lot of people want to do, but we don't give enough thought about it. You brought up in a way where you say you do one thing and then you get settled. What do you think is that, from where that desire came in you, that you decided I want to do multiple things, I will do one thing, then move on to other, then do other thing? like, have you ever given it a thought that why I
So
am?
maybe, like I said, part of it is this childhood fascination with polymaths.
Okay.
There are people who have done many
Many
things,
things, yeah.
right? So at some level that interests you. And you also recognize that really large things, large problems, are often solvable only at the intersection of many different approaches. Therefore, you really need to be a technologist and a communicator and a political person and all sorts of things to be able to solve certain problems. Once a problem that you identify to work on is large enough, it almost requires you to address it in many ways.
Yeah.
And it helps if you have given yourself the capacity to do that.
So, was there any role model for you when you were growing up? Like any?
Not in this way. I mean, individual role models of various things, right?
Okay.
You say, okay, some people taught you virtue, some people taught you skill, some people taught you empathy, and some people taught you whatever.
No.
But in general, like I said, a lot of this is just the home environment. You are expected to grow up in a certain way. And this is true in a lot of homes. Genuinely, I believe that. It's not like, as much as I credit my family with what they imbibed in me, I think a lot of families want their children to be competent, virtuous, caring, all of those things. These are not uncommon. And in fact, it's kind of sad that now people will say, "Was zamana badal gaya, sir." Right? Now, they will even say, not you and me. They'll say, you can't trust people. Not you and me, but zamana badal gaya.
So, no one is trusting anybody.
But then they will say, I can trust you, you can trust me, but neither of us can trust this third person. But you will say that only to me. When you talk to the third, to him, you will say
the same thing.
You will say the same thing to him. So actually, rather than accept zamana badal gaya, you cannot trust anybody, and then they'll also say people will not do anything except for self-interest. I think it's important to fight that sentiment itself.
Okay.
The idea of purpose, the idea of empathy, the idea of just being driven or called to solve problems. I feel this is an idea that should sustain itself regardless of whether people actually do it. It's like, jhoot mat bolo, people will say. Like your parents will say, don't tell lies. Right? Now, that doesn't mean children don't tell lies. They do from time to time. But the idea that you should not tell lies has still survived. Right? It still survives.
Okay.
And I feel we should hold on to that. The idea of what it means to be a good citizen, to be, considerate about the environment and responsible, to be fair to other people. I think those ideas should sustain, and that all of us have an obligation to help sustain those ideas.
So you will strive to become at least some version of it. If the idea is sustained, if you are giving up on an idea,
you shouldn't even have to strive.
It should come.
So a lot of people ask, for example, they'll say, like, how do you become this or become that? You can't really become anything. You are that. You know, in many cases, of course, you can always become a scientist by studying science. But a lot of what happens afterwards is about how you choose to live. It's not about what you do. Most people are trying to extrapolate from their functional roles rather than sort of deconstruct from how they have chosen to live.
Okay. So on public problem front, what do you think is the success? Like, you have to define success and failure for any experiment or in general, in one term?
Not necessarily. So,
Okay.
so
What?
In the early 1900s, there was a very famous public figure. One of the most famous public figures of that time was Gopal Krishna Gokhale, right? But he did not live to see independence. If you take, like him, you can take very many famous fighters for independence who did not live to see independence.
Yeah.
Would you say they failed?
No.
No,
Yeah.
you would not, right? It's like that in each generation, it is the responsibility of that generation to fight for and strive for certain good things, which may only arrive later, or whose benefits they may never themselves experience. But nonetheless, it is both a responsibility and an interesting thing to do.
Hmm.
And we are all inheritors of other people's efforts to make things better.
Hmm.
And the deal is that you continue that. You pass it forward.
You keep trying.
Yeah, you keep trying. That doesn't mean you accept delay.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean, okay, in about 100 years it will happen, I do whatever I can kind of thing. That's not it. You have to have urgency in what you try. But you have to also recognize the world is more complex than your ability to influence it.
Yes, it's so is there anything in life like you would like to go back and change in your life, like some decision, or if you have a time machine right now, you will think, okay, that moment I could have done something different, or
Yeah, I hope the honest answer for all of us is yes.
yeah, okay.
But I'm not going to tell you.
Yes. Okay. So in the last, any tip or mantra for all the people, all the students of public policy, general who are watching this, for them, like in terms of problem solving, in terms of life, in terms of profession, any one thing which you want to share with the viewers?
I think make a distinction between public policy and public problem solving.
Okay.
And through the course of your learning of policy, also make sure there is a path to learn public problem solving, either with already embedded in the policy learning or separately in parallel. Because I feel the learning of problem solving will really make it, will make the application of the learning of policy that much stronger.
Okay, so thank you very much for joining us. I hope you continue to enlighten, impart knowledge, inspire the people to solve the wicked problems. It was very fascinating to talk with you. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. I had a good course as well, and I look forward to being able to continue this side of my work as well.
So we also look forward to keep welcoming you in Kautilyans School of Public Policy.
Thank you.
So that's it from this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Stay tuned for more episodes.